council meeting following this, so who should I hand this off to?
I think we're going to start with Alan Davis to give a brief overview, and then he's going to toss it to Jason White and really try to get this open for questions that the council members may have. But trying to follow through on the goal that council gave me of working on industrial parkland and marketing of that, and this is their report. So, Alan, take it away.
Very good. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the workshop. What I think it might be useful is for introductions, since I'm not sure everybody knows everybody who's at the table. And in the crowd there, I'm Alan Davis, Community Development Director for the City of Oshkosh.
Mark Roloff, City Manager.
Steve Herman, City Council.
Jake Krause, City Council.
Darren Burge, Planning.
Matt Mugrower, City Council.
Lori Palmieri, City Council.
Steve Cummings, Mayor.
Jason White, Greater Oshkosh Economic Development. And I also have some folks joining me tonight, so I don't know if they want to introduce themselves or if you want me to introduce them.
Perhaps since you have the microphone, you could introduce them.
That's a good idea. So we got several members of my board here tonight, and I do want to thank the council for inviting us to be a part of this discussion, first and foremost. I think this is important, and obviously it determines it's involved discussion about the direction of our economic development program in a lot of ways. So I appreciate very much being a part of this tonight. We have several board members here tonight. We have Stan Liedl, Choice Bank, and also our board treasurer. We have Chris Golem from Dynamic Drinkware behind Steve. And then we have also behind Jake, we have our council member Krause. We have Kristen Fastbinder of Oshkosh Corporation. And then from our staff team, we have Kimberly Land, we have Audra Hoy, and we have Art Ratchin. So thank you very much.
Great. What I'm planning on doing is going over the city manager's goal. If you recall, there's current inventory. We'll talk about the sites that we have, and then talk about the marketing program that we have and business retention expansion program that we're operating. So I'll go over the inventory, the strategy, the marketing, and some economic development incentives. So we kind of threw that in because that's important to this whole calculation we go through when it comes to economic development and selling industrial parkland. The first item I'm actually going to hand over to Mr. Burrich because these are kind of some planning inventory type of things, and wanted to hand it off to Mr. Burrich. You have a microphone?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so apparently a slide that we added this morning didn't get into here. We had a slide that showed the annual park sales. It was something that we tried to get in today. We had a history of land sales in the park, so it showed a nice bar graph. And what it's going to show is that over the last few years, we haven't had a lot of industrial park land sales, and I think the annual absorption rate that we've looked at over the past 30 plus years is about 5 acres a year. So basically, what it was showing you is we had a glut of, or not a glut, we had a lot of land sales in the 90s to 2000s. So we were selling 30 to 40 to 50 acres a year. So when we started doing our planning back in '05 for this particular map that you're seeing up here, which shows the zone land, that was what based a lot of our comp planning on, was the amount of industrial park absorption that we've done over the years. This particular map that we're showing right here, this shows all the area in the community that is zoned either urban industrial. Urban industrial is kind of that light pink area, light purple area, and the heavy stuff is the purple color. So that's everything that's zoned HI. And then the blue is the business park area, which is this area right here south of 44. This is the map that shows our current inventory of developable or vacant lands within the community, and we've broken this out by each of the industrial parks: Southwest, Universal, Aviation Business, Universal. So you can see nothing available right now for developable. From a city-owned standpoint, up in Northwest Industrial, we're sitting at about 107 acres. Most of that is outside of the city right now. I think that's Boschwitz. We haven't annexed that yet. Southwest Industrial Park is where we have the most amount of developable lands, and you can see on this map, the red is, we call it the shovel-ready map. The red is the areas that we control, but they're not shovel-ready because we don't have utilities, infrastructure to those areas. The green are those shovel-ready and those ready-to-develop lots. You can see over here in the southwest, we have a number of parcels, and then down in the Aviation Business Park and Aviation Industrial Park. This shows that shovel-ready inventory, and that totals about 118, almost 119 acres, with the vast majority of that lying in the Southwest Industrial Park, some in the Aviation Business Park, and then some remaining in Universal Business Park. The Universal Business Park has a combination of city-owned lands that aren't developed, and a few years ago we sawed off several acres, private parties that aren't developed at this time. And these are just maps showing each of the industrial parks where that vacant inventory is. So here's the Southwest Industrial Park. You can see this is where the transload site is. All this other stuff outside the transload site is not developable yet until we get some infrastructure in here. But you can see on the south side the tracks where those lands are. Aviation Business Park. This shows the lands available in that park. This side is on the county side that they're still developing. We're still working on. This would be the Northwest Industrial Park. So you can see here's Fernau coming through, and here's that Boschwitz piece that can be developed at some point. And then I guess I'm done.
Yep. So there's two shovel-ready programs that exist here in Oshkosh, or it's available in Oshkosh. Number one is through New North. We were a early adopter, kind of a beta tester for the gold shovel program. That was something we worked on in the last year, and we just heard earlier this summer that we did complete that program for the Aviation Business Park. So we're hoping New North and WEDC can carry that further with their marketing efforts. WEDC does have a certified site program. However, it does take about $40,000 per parcel to get on that list because they require third-party verification of so much information that we'd have to hire these professionals to do the soil borings and the analysis before they'd allow it to be listed as a certified site. And at this point in time, we've chosen not to do that based on the cost. If you do that for every parcel, we'd be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for the city of Oshkosh. This is the matrix of land prices and amenities. As you can see on the price, we do have a variation between, say, the Aviation Business Park and the Aviation Industrial Park, and even the Universal Business Park, the $250 a square foot, that's our highest price. The 26 to 35, that's on the lower half of the range when it comes to competing communities, at least communities that we see we're competing with. We all have really good access to I-41. We do have utilities. We don't always have a street that's available. In fact, with Clark Hill, we don't actually even have utilities available to the Clark Hill 80 acres at this point in time. Oftentimes we have a regional stormwater pond, but not always. Some of our parcels have access to rail, which we think is a big selling point in today's age. And one of them will have direct access to a runway. And let me clarify, it's the city side that is certified. The county side has the direct access to Whitman, but they can only lease their property. They can't sell it since it's owned by the county, and that's one of the requirements of the airport is they have to lease the land, and you can build your structure on it for a long-term lease. So that's the physical conditions that we have at the industrial parks and business parks. When we start talking about marketing, it's a real broad topic when it comes to marketing. And here I'd ask Mr. White to chime in as to where things are going on the marketing and advertising side.
I do want to provide a few examples of what we're doing to market the city-owned properties, but really all available properties in the city for economic development purposes. But I just wanted to quickly provide a refresher in terms of the focuses of our adopted strategic plan for 2018 through 2020. And I think really, a lot of times you look at economic development as a three-legged stool with, taking care of your companies, taking care of your entrepreneurs, and competing for new business investment. And all of those things are important if you're going to have a comprehensive economic development strategy. Today, in the environment in which we work, one of those legs is a little longer than the other, and that's existing businesses. We're at a situation right now where we have historically low unemployment, we have historically high employment, and we have a very low rate of population growth here in the greater Oshkosh community. So we're finding more and more the drumbeat of workforce development, which is the other appearance that made within our initiative, to really try to hone our strategy around, first and foremost, taking care of our companies. I think as the next slide will show, and I'm not going to go through all the bullet points, but there's one of those bullet points that I wanted to point out, which is I would really argue, and I think the evidence would as well, that you enhance your chances of recruiting companies and building upon your success when your companies are happy and they're feeling like they're taken care for in your community. A lot of things I always look at is, the job of economic development doesn't stop when you recruit a company. It's just starting. And there's a lot of needs that happen after that company decides and announces to locate in your community. So they become ambassadors for the community. So if they feel like their needs are being taken care of, others in the industry will also, in their industry, will become aware of that, and they're more likely to consider our community. So the more business friendly we can be to our existing folks, to our existing developers in our businesses, the better chances we are to feed upon that success with new folks that want to be a part of our community as well. Just a couple of examples of things that we're finding through our account management program, and of course we've pledged to you and also within our strategic plan of connecting with 150 companies plus per year. And these are common things that we hear, especially number one, which is, a local manufacturing company with 100 employees has 15 openings that they cannot fill. They've raised their wages twice this year, and now they're turning down new business, new contracts, new sales. That kind of thing makes an economic developer like me lose a lot of sleep at night, because obviously that's the opposite of economic development, is not, our businesses not being able to grow and find the human resource talent that they need. But we do hear a lot of questions from our folks about, what are you doing trying to bring in new companies, bring in more businesses, competition for labor, when we have a lot of our companies that have that many or more, 10%, 15%, up to 20% of their positions they can't fill. Another thing I think is also I found recently that was interesting was a couple of surveys, one of which surveyed 72 site selectors that represent big projects every year and help those companies find locations. And the interesting analysis was the Midwest is the chosen location that a lot of these folks want to go to. Their clients want to be in the Midwest. We have a great competitive environment for them to do business. In that same article, another poll of businesses found that the Midwest is also the last region that companies choose to locate. And if you go back to the first survey, in terms of site selection factors, transportation and workforce are two of the leading factors that companies use when choosing a location. I think we can argue that Oshkosh has invested in a lot in their transportation infrastructure, but that workforce development, workforce availability factor is certainly not weighing in our favor right now. So we have a few clusters, and we continue to hone in on this. Manufacturing is our leading industry, has been our leading industry, and is also probably and likely and will be our future as well. And I think you can argue, obviously, with 300 companies of 25,000 employees, that obviously taking care of those folks is of paramount to the community. And I think at this, we have maybe a slide or two. I'm going to turn back to Alan before he kicks it back to me.
Yes, based on what I've seen with our competition and what kind of competitive advantages I think the city has right now that we're trying to take advantage of, exploit. Rail access with Canadian National and Wisconsin Southern Railroad. I think we're blessed with two companies that I think that serves us well on the transportation side. So we're trying to identify those types of businesses that need that type of service. Aviation is still a high priority. When I first got here with the city of Oshkosh, we were trying to figure out how we can take advantage of EAA Air Venture and the ties there. And over time, we've established an aviation business park, and we've used the Department of Defense to help us recruit more workers and businesses that are aviation related. Heavy industrial is still a niche that very few other communities in the country can fill. And lastly, now that we've become an I-41, distribution, trucking is still a high priority when it comes to recruitment for our business and industrial parks. And just to follow up on some of the things that Jason mentioned earlier regarding business retention and expansion, he mentioned the 150 contacts annually. That's going to be internal and external. And that includes everything that we can generate with Watco and the Transload site, with the aviation ties that we've already created at the Whitman, as well as with the Department of Defense contract with the maintenance, repair, and overhaul and additive manufacturing niches within that area that the city has been working with Greater Oshkosh EDC and East Central to identify and put those niches together for Oshkosh. But lastly, finding workers for existing jobs. That was another major thrust with the Department of Defense program, and there were two job recruitment activities. One was at the Menominee Nation Arena, and the second was at EAA Air Venture, a week-long event. And as time goes by, we'll get that information out to the Department of Defense and East Central, so they can see we've done exactly what we were intending to do, is recruit more people for Oshkosh. But when it comes to marketing, wanted to identify the ways that we work on marketing these properties. A lot of it is done through property searches, proposals and responses, as well as the marketing activities we do in a proactive manner that we want to highlight, and we weren't sure everybody was aware of what we were doing. So we decided to put some slides together to show that story.
So one of the things I think it's good to note is that, we have had a fair number of property searches this year, and, we get property we get site leads or prospect leads from a variety of sources, but a lot of times, they might be direct to us. They may be through a referral from a real estate broker. They may be through New North, which this year we've actually got a fair number of leads from New North. And I think the one thing, and Kimberly does a great job of coordinating this on our team, is I think one of the strengths of our economic development organization, I think that stands out in Northeast Wisconsin, is how thorough we are with our site selection efforts and helping either an existing company or a new business looking for a location. I think New North even commonly comments that we're one of the few organizations that anytime there's a chance that we can reply to one of their RFIs, we do it. And in fact, right now, I think we have a visit from a prospect coded as site project September later this month, where they're going to be visiting 4 Oshkosh buildings, 1 in Winneconne. And I think as of now, we're the only community that they're visiting. I think we got a gentleman coming from overseas actually to visit our community later this month for that one. I think also there's other examples. A site selection search we did not help with, but that's, Chris Golem introduced earlier from Dynamic Drinkware, purchasing the Avalon Papers building, the former Avalon Papers building in the Southwest Industrial Park. But one we are helping them with right now is the lots behind their building, which they've also purchased for future expansion considerations, and we're working with them. That's city-owned property. They were formerly city-owned property. We're working with them on some covenant issues at present. So a couple of different examples there of different things that we've worked on, but I think we have an expansive list that we work with. Kimberly has 129 real estate brokers now that she's in communication with on a regular basis when we do get a lead. Sometimes we'll also send those out to the outlying communities as well to make sure we're as thorough as possible. So, companies, by and large, will choose to always expand at their current location if they can. Secondly, then they'll look for a building if they've outgrown what their space is at present. And then thirdly, then they'll look for a site. And I think right now, our contractors are also dealing with challenges with workforce as well, in being able to complete their projects. But also our companies are dealing with inflation of costs, raw materials, supplier challenges, obviously with global international trade issues, and so those are all weighing into some of those issues as well in terms of being able to build and purchase an existing site. I'm just going to zoom through these pretty quickly in the interest of time so that we can engage in discussion, but a couple of proposals that we have put together this past year, a couple of years that were successful in partnership with these companies, obviously Oshkosh Corporation, which we actually did with Quill Creative, and then also the Milwaukee Bucks Developmental League proposal, which we worked in partnership with Blue Door on that one. One RFI that we responded to earlier this year, this was an renewable energy project that we did not win, but we provided a very thorough analysis of several different sites in our community. What's also not represented here is an analysis that we purchased from a consultant analyzing our workforce compared to some of the other competitor communities, trying to position ourselves in the best possible light. And I think that actually helped us as part of the analysis because it showed that we had more workforce and a more highly qualified workforce than the other communities we were competing against. Our RFIs, the information we provide back, it kind of varies from one RFI to the next. This is a very thorough one that provides response to a lot of different things regarding utilities, site information, transportation, proximity to major markets, zoning, fiber, et cetera.
Can't see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail there.
Could you just read off the headers real quick?
We have, what are the headers up there?
Selection
There we go.
criteria, option 1, these are options 1 through 5, different locations. And selection criteria include building data. That's building data down to number of loading docks and what kind of loading docks, how many parking spaces, clear height, things of that nature. Number of doors, the flooring, fire suppression, exterior space for silo installation, because some businesses are very specific about what they need. Transportation access, nearest airport, nearest 4-lane highway. Is there rail? We usually do really well on the transportation side. And utility infrastructure regarding water, gas, heating, cooling systems, internet service providers, and electric service providers.
On those RFIs, do they typically ask also for information on the workforce?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, depending on the type of information they're requesting, we may do that research internally. We may go to workforce development, and as I mentioned on the last slide, we actually hired somebody to do an analysis of our community versus the other competitor community. Sometimes we don't know the competitor communities. In that case, we did, so that worked out well.
So there's rather specific level of detail.
Yeah. So, yes, some are and some aren't.
Sometimes you have to do a deeper dive.
We do, yeah.
Like on the second pass.
Yeah, or if you read something into the RFI, some people know exactly what they want. And that's why a lot of times it's buildings. We are not always competitive because if they want a specific building, we'll give them buildings and they may or may not meet their needs. And we know how competitive we are based on comparing the RFI to the actual specs we submit, but we still give a pitch to them, don't we?
Yeah, we do, and I think on that one too, they actually had a site selector working for them too, which if they have a site selector, they tend to be a lot more detailed because they may be looking at several states, and so they want to really get down to brass tacks. But if it's somebody local, we have that relationship with them already, so we can kind of guide them through the process without all of that information. We can kind of go directly to the source.
Jason, in our kind of old format under Chamco, there were a couple times Chamco built buildings for businesses. Are we in a position to do that if that was a request?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things with that. Is one, obviously, that requires it requires cash, obviously, to do that. And I think as an organization, now we have a different model than what Chamco had. I think maybe, and I know we have a lender in the room back there, but I think the banks were, at that point in time, working hand in hand with Chamco and building those spec buildings. I think that model did not prove to be sustainable in the long run. It has come up a couple times, I know, in some of our industrial development committee meetings about the aviation park. We have not pursued that in a serious way so far, even though, as I mentioned before, having a building is a hook, but it's also a risk. It gives you a marketing advantage, but also it presents a lot of risk.
It could sit
You
empty
might-
for a long time.
You might be sitting on it for 5 to 10 years. You might be sitting on it for 5 months. So,
Okay.
but I think it's good to bring that up.
That inventory that we keep of buildings, that's why that's so important, because then we have a pretty good idea if we're competitive if somebody throws out an RFI. And getting folks to get us that building information is really crucial with that.
Yep.
In this early stage of the whole process, if there's an organization or a company potentially going to transfer employees as well, are there questions asked about the quality of life in the community? Schools to housing to, the thing we discuss a lot about, our quality of life.
I think not. I think not as much in the early going, because in the early going it's very quantitative. As you get closer to the decision, it gets more qualitative. Some of those quality of life factors. Workforce's development is important, obviously, and I mentioned some of the ways that it is. But as you get closer to decision making, then the quality of the schools, those types of things become more important too. I think just one quick moment on mentioning that. A couple of years ago, we actually were working with an aviation company from the South. And when it came to the quality of life, they said, I think we were talking to them during AirVenture, and they said, don't have to sell us some quality of life. Based on where they were at, they said, you got us, hands down, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, you guys win on that. So I think it kind of depends on where you're at, different regions of the country, where that company is coming from too.
Okay, and I also wanted to highlight some of the things that the city staff has been doing over the last few years. If you recall, we had an economic development strategic plan, and one of those activities, goals, was to develop Oshkosh website, and staff did complete that last year, and I just wanted to run through a couple of the examples. You can see this is for Develop Oshkosh, for people who want to start businesses, who want to submit online permitting, common questions that we get for city staff. And then we also have the tabs for all the parcels that the city has for the aviation, the industrial, the business parks, including the residential and redevelopment sites, so we didn't leave those properties out. We also have a link to Locate Wisconsin. That's the WEDC run program that anybody who's looking at the state of Wisconsin can put in search criteria. So we include all of our parcels in the Locate in Wisconsin program. That's a free program WEDC offers, so we provide them updated information for all the sites that we have here in the city. Just examples of their screenshots. And then GoEDC does additional marketing on the web.
That's my segue.
Yes. That's as much as a segue as I can.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that too much, because I think the links provided on our website there are not only on the next slide, but are also, I think, part of the handouts that Kimberly distributed with the different profiles of all the industrial parks and also the business park in our community, including the aviation park.
It was interesting, the mayor and I had a discussion this morning, and we were talking about niches, and he mentioned the foreign trade zone, and we do point that out with the Southwest Park, because that's a clear advantage that park has over the other parks. So that's where we provide a little more information when, depending on how deep a dive you want to do. So much of this is done off the internet now that people are surfing and looking for those things. We may never meet somebody until they're deadly serious because they've vetted us out long before you've been able to make a pitch. So a lot of this is making sure that that level of detail is there so that when they start, it's like, well, the Southwest Industrial Park looks good because I am interested in a foreign trade zone. And if they are interested in a foreign trade zone, that kind of rules out some of the other sites. So depending on what their niche is, aviation or whatever, I think that's what we do a very good job at.
We also have signs that on the vacant parcels that we have in our industrial business parks. Typically, that's sized based on the speed that people are traveling when they go by. Larger signs for the higher speeds and smaller signs for the lower speed properties.
And I see too that we're looking at putting some more money in the budget towards additional signage, correct?
Yes, which is different from this temporary real estate type of signage. This would be more like, the Universal Business Park has the permanent sign that's made out of brick that identifies it as the Oshkosh
Okay.
Universal Business Park. Potentially, we could be doing something like that for the Southwest Industrial Park or the Aviation Business Park or even the Northwest.
It just, I don't know, I've always wondered why we didn't have more prominent signage on a number of those parcels. It just seems like we could do a little better on that.
It's more of a gateway sign to that park. The only comment I made when I went through this, it doesn't look like we're serious with those signs.
So you want bigger, more
We have
elaborate
bigger
signs?
signs when we're running for election. It doesn't, it looks like it was an afterthought and somebody ran out and did it in their garage and tacked them in the ground.
Well, we can adjust the size and
In other
permanence
cities,
of all those signs.
you see these, pretty significant, and just thinking of, I don't know, northern suburb of Milwaukee, driving through last week, massive, development opportunity, stuff that's, and maybe because everything is going more web-driven, we may not, but based on the number of traffic that we get for large events and things like that, it would seem that, the old-fashioned low-tech might have a little more punch to it.
And I know we've generated leads from just the signs.
Yeah.
So that does happen still.
Exactly.
I'm sure there are people, I'm not sure how the site selectors go about selecting, but they do drive through communities looking to see what's available before they even want to get hooked up with people like you. They're just,
So would that show
we
up
should
on-
look serious.
Would that show up on Google Earth?
Only if they took a picture of it just when,
The little street view
Yes.
guy?
I'm not sure I've looked at it from Google Earth. Have you tried
If there
that?
was a sign, possibly, but yeah, that's something you could look at.
I think they update about every 6 months. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
like it's gotta be there when
Sometimes
when
the
you drive
industrial
past.
parks, maybe not as much as a busy street, so that we can certainly look at that.
But I also think when it comes to signage and land available, I go back to what Mr. White said and even Mr. Davis. We're really focusing on expanding existing companies in the area per se and keeping them here. And if they need more land or more buildings, we have that available too. So I think sometimes it's your focus. If the focus is to sell off the land, then you spend more money on the marketing side. But if you're spending most of your money on business retention and business partners and workforce, well, then you don't need as much money maybe to spend to market your vacant land because that's not what the market's calling for at this time. So I think it kind of depends on what the market is calling for, how much we pursue. I mean, I agree. I would like to have maybe even a big billboard that, as people drive by 41, that says Oshkosh, place to build or something, or place to move your company or something like that. But it costs money. It costs a lot of money to put those electronic billboards. But at the same time, if that's not our focus, because we're really focusing on keeping what we have and expanding what we have, then it wouldn't make sense to spend a lot of money on the marketing side.
We're talking today, in 5
Right.
years, the economy could be.
Well, it could be different, sure.
totally-
And I think we gotta be flexible as a council.
We should be thinking about 5 years from now, or
Sure.
10 years from now, not about the next 12 months.
True.
Well, we've got some more marketing materials that I want to make sure we cover, and we're only about halfway through. So we'll have to stop start talking quicker. This is yours, just an example.
Just an example of just marketing some additional assets that obviously you as a council and the community have invested in, and that is the obviously the Transload terminal, which sticks out obviously in the state of Wisconsin in terms of being a city-owned transload leased to a railroad operator. So not only do we have that prominently featured on our website, but we also made a aerial not only photo but also a short video flyover of that location as well. Obviously, you can see some of the other things that we've done to highlight that opportunity, both with obviously participating in the ribbon cutting that you guys had sponsored, the city had sponsored with Wisconsin and Southern, and also with some additional marketing and brochures and news releases and so on and so forth that came from that on the next slide as well.
And WACO uses that information in terms of soliciting for people as well, is that correct?
They do, yep. Yeah, they've kind of utilized our organization in a big way as a extended marketing arm with their different prospects that they're working with, and very encouraged just based on the meetings we've had that next year is going to be a big year around that transload. So with that, we also had marketed the Chamco building RFP, and also some of the other properties. We utilized our social media to market the city-owned properties on our social media, which we use a lot of that for exposure. And you can see some of the other things that we've done to highlight our aviation park, our aviation brand as a community around AirVenture, and our shipping opportunities with the Transload. And I'm just going to skim through this real quickly because you can always read it in further detail later if you need to or want to. But just also some regional publications in terms of telling Oshkosh's story, the companies we have here, and the economic development assets and how it stands out in Northeast Wisconsin. So we can, other than that, I think we'll turn it back over to Mr. Davis and we can have some discussion if there's time.
Yep, we got a few more items that I put on the agenda because I thought they were important discussion points when it comes to economic development and economic development incentives. We've been very successful over the years regarding getting grants for the city on various economic development projects. We also updated our tax increment finance policy just last year so that we can apply that for not only redevelopment but new industrial development. And we added the mixed use as one of those uses that we permit under the TIF policy. We also have funded economic development programs, which Mr. White and GoEDC administers on the city's behalf for the revolving loan fund, and you've been able to capitalize that on the Capital Catalyst.
Yeah, the revolving loan fund, and Audra's here tonight to talk about how that plays a role in these projects as well. But obviously, the Capital Catalyst was just recapitalized, obviously, by both funding from the RLF and also from the WEDC and Chamco.
This slide right here I put in specifically to let you know we are competing with a lot of people, not only in Wisconsin, but around the country, if not worldwide. Other incentives that we've seen offered include land write-downs, which is basically not selling for $26,000 or $35,000 an acre, but it's giving the land away. You could always do that. Some communities create a TIF inside an industrial park TIF, and then they could do almost a pay-go or a grant program inside their industrial park. The city's never done that, to my knowledge, so that we provide the incentive through the land, not the building and the employees that are created, but other communities do. And that is a sweetener that we do not offer.
Does our TIF policy allow it though? Or would that be, we'd have to adjust our policy?
I think technically we could allow that, but it typically would make the parent TIF less feasible, because then that new increment is paying off the incentive you offered in the business, not the sewer, water, and street that you invested to make that a shovel-ready site.
Our industrial park TIFs were modeled after the TIF would pay off the infrastructure that we put in. We'd have to be very judicious about that. If it was, let's say it was to maybe be a catalyst for other growth, you might want to consider that, but you have to take a look at the loss you would incur because what was
Parent
it?
TIF?
The parent TIF
If you wanna call it
would
that.
not benefit from that. It would be the newly formed TIF. So you have to be cautious about that. And that's gonna be a real challenge, especially with the transload site. A lot of those facilities, while they're permitted, they don't generate as high tax base.
Per acre.
Per acre, some of the warehousing type of thing. But they're valuable to support the rest of the economic infrastructure. A lot of businesses like that capability of having the warehouse facilities there, but is it gonna generate the jobs? Well, right now, jobs aren't an issue, so that's not necessarily a bad thing if they don't generate a ton of jobs. But will they generate the tax increment necessary to fund the infrastructure? And that's gonna be a real challenge, and as Trina and I get into discussions on infrastructure, Compass Way, the worst thing that could happen to us is the best thing. If the transload facility takes off, the good news is that we're gonna have people that are interested in the park. The bad news is that we're gonna have to get Compass Way done, and that's not budgeted right now. And so and that'll have to get funded through a TIF. So it's one of those good news, bad news types of things that we'll have to work on. All right.
And we've also seen that other communities have different development standards, lower development standards than we have when it comes to our covenants and our zoning requirements, when it comes to the building and the landscaping and the other specific requirements for development. So in my conclusion, we certainly have shovel-ready sites, but not everything's shovel-ready yet. We certainly have an economic development strategy and marketing activities. You've heard business retention and expansion is a high priority right now. I would say the majority of occupants in our industrial and business parks were expansions of existing Oshkosh or relocations within Oshkosh. So I can never stress that enough, that business retention and expansion probably filled most of those parks that we have right now out there. And I expect that will continue in the future. We also can offer people economic development incentives, but we are not as competitive as we could be if we were competing not only in the state but the country and the world when it comes to economic development incentives, and it's almost a marketing activity on its own. And then I just wanted to conclude with about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to hear from staff regarding this particular topic?
I do have one question, and I've had conversations with Chancellor Levitt about this, but encouraging minority-owned businesses to the area. Has there been any activity in that nature? Or planned activity, I should say.
Or the women and minority, the WIBIC activities that seem to be more targeted. Madison, Milwaukee, I don't know that there is a Fox Cities satellite of that. Are we?
A WIBIC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're setting up an office in Grand Chute. I think they got an open house in a couple weeks. We are actually reaching out to some of the statewide chambers of commerce organizations for minority-based coalitions to see about what kind of presence they have here for membership here in the greater Oshkosh community. It's kind of unknown right now.
Are you
But
familiar with the Regional People of Color Business Association?
I'm not.
They formed, I think, 2 years ago.
Okay.
Just one question, Alan, maybe either, probably Jason.
Robertson and I are playing phone tag on that exact topic.
Great, wonderful.
On economic incentives, the revolving loan fund and capital catalyst, I know a lot of that is, it's a public-private partnership, and the private side's really invested fairly significant with that. How important is that to keep that that going? Is that, I know it's created a few businesses, Fifth Ward Brewing got some stuff, and so I guess I'm just, as we get into our budget, in keeping money where it needs to go, how important is it to this overall picture?
Audrey, do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
Come up to the mic.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. We've done about $190,000 in loans for the revolving loan fund in the last year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. And we've done $200,000 in loans and $50,000 in grants for Capital Catalyst, and that was in 9 months. Obviously, that's been recapitalized to $250,000. So if you know of any businesses, please refer them my way when it comes to startups. And when we look at Fifth Ward, yes, obviously was a Capital Catalyst recipient. Also, B. Bella was a loan recipient in Capital Catalyst. They just got picked up by Whole Foods. So we've got a really awesome Oshkosh business that is now going to be on a national level, making a really great product. We have great ideas, and we're keeping them here. They're growing here. And when I looked at our RLF numbers, 3 of our 4 loans over the last couple of years are all in 54901, and 5 of our 7 awardees for Capital Catalyst were also in Central City. So both those programs not only are helping build strong businesses, keep ideas, keep talent, retain the strength and work ethic of our community, but it's also revitalizing our Central City. So it's incredibly important. And hopefully we want those funds to be evergreen. Everyone's current on their loans. We want those funds to continue to get repaid, let the interest grow, help other businesses, and just kind of feed.
And the grant funds are coming from the state. It's not city funds
Yep,
that go towards
so-
the grant.
Yep, the Capital Catalyst is a $125,000 loan from the state, or award from the state that we matched, and we are required to give a third of that away in the form of grants, which is about $42,500. So.
And I think you could find, and maybe Steve, this is where you were going, even though we've only loaned out $190,000, the activity that Audra is seeing, we could potentially tap out our entire fund. Now, will we? We don't know. Part of our goal is, our goal is to do that.
Yeah, I've got about 6 prospects for RLF right now, and some are ready to fill out an application, and some are in the process of working with their lender to see if they actually need us. The ideal situation is that we fill the gap, that the lender is the one actually doing the deal. We're just helping close the deal. So it could end up being a lot of money being asked of us, or potentially a little, but at least we're at the table helping facilitate that conversation.
And the RLF committee does take a very strong look at all of these. These are not just rubber stamps. I know that they've said no to certain people, that they just don't meet the criteria, and so they're treating it as if it's their own money. So we really appreciate that. Dan, did I say that correctly? Stan's the chair of the committee, and they.
Well, I just
take a
think
strong
he's
bank
smiling.
look at it. He's smiling, yes.
I've thought it was important all along, and when it was first started, and I just want to make sure that we continue the partnership that we have and continue funding that, because obviously it's enhancing the opportunities in the greater Oshkosh area, so. Good, thank you.
And I heard loud and clear that we need to examine our signs, so that's what I'll follow up with staff after this meeting.
I'll give you dimension.
All right, thank you very much.
Is there anything else, because this was something that council had talked about as
Unless there are other
one of my goals.
questions, we've got a council meeting in 14 minutes.
We're good?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add, if I may, is, like I said, I brought a couple of my board members, invited them to come tonight, so I appreciated that. And if you want to, I know this is an issue that the council is very keen on, because obviously you own a lot of land, the city owns a lot of land, and obviously you would like to sell it to meaningful businesses and prospects that can grow and develop in our community. And I think we do view that as a means to an end. And so it's nice to have. But at the same time, if you want to talk or give more perspectives about how existing companies in our community view this issue, would definitely encourage you to speak to any of our board members here tonight to kind of give that perspective too.
Or they'll be there tomorrow night for the open house.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, if there are no further questions, thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for the council meeting at 6 o'clock. Talk to you a lot.
The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly.